So we're here at Bang and Olufsen of Wilmslow. I believe this is currently one of the very few places in the country where they have Beolab 5, Beolab 50 and Beolab 90 speakers all on display in the same room. I've not seen that anywhere else, and for years I've been wanting to compare these three speakers. Each one absolutely superlative in its own way. But do the price tags alone decide which is the best? I think it's time to find out. Thanks, Nick. So, yeah, could you show us around the store, please?
Have a tour of our showroom.
Start with Beolab 5. Now, correct me if I'm wrong on any of the specs. 2003, it was one of the last David Lewis designs, so it's an absolute icon. Technically, at the time, was groundbreaking. A complete marvel. We've got a four-way speaker design, a high tweeter for the treble with 250 watts on its own amplifier, a mid-treble driver with 250 watts on an amp, a mid-bass driver with a 1000 watt digital amp, and a 15-inch downward firing subwoofer with, again, 1000 watts on the digital amp. I'm sure I'm going to start getting something wrong in a minute. Let's see. So we've got the revolution at the time was a wide parabolic lens which gave 180-degree dispersion to the sound for mid-treble and high treble. So if I remember rightly, that was David Moulton of Moulton Labs and Danny Lacaruba of Sausalito Audio who worked with B&O on this. And this meant that for the first time you didn't have to sit in one particular chair in the room to get the right sound. Anyone within 180 degrees of the front of the speaker got perfect stereo sound.
That's it. Yeah.
And the other revolution is underneath here is a little microphone, which on touch of a button at the top of the speaker pops down and measures the sound. 7 different frequencies between 20 hertz and 300 hertz, so covering the bass up to about the pitch of my voice, and it measures the room. Each room interacts with the speakers in its own way, and what this speaker counteracts any errors in the room's sonic signature and gives you perfect bass response.
Sure.
So absolutely revolutionary at the time, and still very, very hard to match, let alone to beat.
It hasn't dated at all.
No, an absolute icon. So let's move on to Beolab 50. Lab 50. Now we've come on, let's see, 15 years since Beolab 5.
That's right.
Some would say 50 is 50% of a Beolab 90, but couldn't be further from the truth. This is an ultimate speaker in its own way. We've got on paper a similar spec to the Beolab 5 in some ways. We're looking at 14 hertz to 43 kilohertz response, way beyond the limits of human hearing. We've got 2,100 watts of drivers now. We've got a tweeter with 300 watts on its own digital amp, 3 mid-range drivers with 300 watts each, and 3 bass drivers with 300 watts each.
Let's have a look under the hood.
Oh yes, thank you. I love the white gloves. That's great, that will keep it all clean. I'll keep my hands clear. So in some ways the Beolab 50 exceeds the capabilities of the 90. In theory it has a deeper bass and higher treble response. Huge bass drivers, and so we've got the capability here to widen or narrow the soundstage. So whereas with Beolab 5s we've got those fixed elliptical dishes that give you the 180-degree response, when these are in wide mode they do the same thing, if I'm right. Yes. And then what we can do is electronically narrow that soundstage, which will motorise the surrounds of the tweeter, bring those in and narrow the soundstage, so it'll bring you back to a traditional stereo speaker with a sweet spot in the room. And the digital processing in here goes another level above that in the Lab 5s. So instead of just emitting a set of bass tones that monitor what the room is doing, we're now looking at swept frequencies right across a much wider frequency band that look at the whole sonic signature of a room, reflections from walls, ceilings, furniture, and completely customising the sound of the speaker.
Absolutely.
So we're going way beyond what the Beolab 5s can do in terms of adapting to the environment. And I think am I right in saying probably about the same ultimate sound output?
Yes.
I think we were looking at about 110 to 120 decibels in room on the Lab 5s. I think fairly similar on these, way beyond what is comfortable to listen to, but crystal clear. So let's have a look at the Beolab 90s.
Okay.
Moving up to Beolab 90, this is quite a bit more of a speaker in a lot of respects, isn't it? So we've gone from the metre-high Beolab 5, from the Beolab 50 up to around about 1.2, 1.3 metres, from the 60 kilos or so of each of the two smaller speakers, yep, up to 137 kilos, is it? Something like that. And again, correct me if I'm wrong here, from memory, I think we've got 18 drivers, 7 tweeters for the treble, each with their own 300 watt digital amp, facing in all different directions. And we'll come to the reason for that in a moment. We've then got 7 mid-treble drivers, again facing all around the speaker with a 300 watt amp on each. We've then got 3 mid-bass drivers with 1,000 watts on each and a sub-bass driver with 1,000 watts. So we should have 8,200 watts per channel in theory, maximum capability. The reason I say in theory is on a 13 amp UK mains outlet, we've got 3,250 watts constant draw available. But any of these amps can take their maximum current draw at any time. So you could have 3,250 watts of power output with 1,000 watts from the subwoofer. So, or with all the tweeters at maximum power depending on the music. So the capability goes way, way beyond what you'd first think. Technically, this goes beyond Beolab 50 and Beolab 5 in a lot of other ways, isn't it?
Absolutely, with the technology that we have with beam direction control, beam width control, the filters that we do with the room calibration make this a very, very accurate loudspeaker.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I must stress that when we're going to be talking about the comparisons between them, I had a chat with Jeff Martin, who was instrumental in the design of the sound on the Beolab 90 and the 50s, and he said that this is like comparing two cars, one of which has 5 gears, one has 6. To make any meaningful comparison, we've almost got to hold the Beolab 90s back to get them to match the other speakers, but then we're going to listen to them at their best and see what they've got above the others. The digital technology in this goes way beyond the other speakers. We're looking at it has a calibration mic which goes to the listening position, if I remember right, produces swept cycles of tones which then the speaker listens back to, and it can then hear the sonic signature of the room, cancel out reflections. So if it has, for example, like here, a wall directly behind, it can hear the effect of that wall as a submarine would with sonar. It can then produce out of phase signals sent to the rear drivers at just the right time to cancel reflections and give you just the correct sound. I've studied digital signal processing, and this blows my mind, and I'm very, very impressed with the technical spec, really interested to hear how it performs. So shall we have a listen?
Let's get on.
Yep. Wow, that's quite an experience. I mean, we've had a listen. How on earth are we going to summarise 3 of potentially the world's top 5 loudspeakers in one go?
It's a difficult job, Steve, but I'm sure you're the man for it.
Right. Let's see if we can put this into words. It's worth saying the reason we haven't put the music directly onto the video, obviously, is for copyright reasons, YouTube won't allow that. But also, if you're listening at home on Apple earbuds, as good as they are, or Beats headphones, you won't hear the same sound that we're hearing now face to face through this lapel mic and your earphones or your home speakers. So it's worth saying that you need to hear them for yourself, isn't it?
That's right, absolutely.
Yeah, there's no substitute. And wow, this has been an experience. I think I came here with a bit of a misconception, to be honest. I came here thinking that we would have a progression of, we would have Beolab 5s as the old master, but now retired and superseded. Beolab 50s as a Beolab 90 light. Okay in their own right, but overshadowed. And then sort of the king of the roost, the Beolab 90. But I think the best way I can describe that era is to, I suppose, as a sports car fanatic, I'd say the best way is to give a parallel. The Beolab 5 got to be the Porsche 911. Perennial style icon, good at everything. I've heard these on stage in a concert hall, I've heard these in the monitoring room of a recording studio, I've heard them here in the showroom, and they just take everything in their stride. Maybe not the ultimate analytical speaker, but so good at everything that you can forgive them their few weaknesses. I suppose Beolab 50, Ferrari 458, the baby superstar but never overshadowed. Probably all the speaker you'd ever need, and then some. The sort of thing that everyone who sees it will be wowed by it. It's jaw-dropping to look at, to listen to, incredible. Beolab 90, how can you describe that? It's a Bugatti Chiron. It's the technical tour de force. There's nothing like it. It's I suppose really it's a demonstration of just what can be done with no holes barred, no barriers. Absolutely incredible. I worry now about how I'm going to go back to listening to lesser speakers after hearing these properly.
Hearing them in the flesh,
yes,
puts everything into context, and it's great that you've had the opportunity to come to Wilmslow and to listen to all three in situ, so you can make a definitive comparison. People might say this room is different to that room. Our showroom environment, you've heard all three speakers in the same acoustic setting.
That's
and
right.
Made those comparisons.
Yes, and it's worth noting as well, we've done a few things that to try and give a comparison between them as we've listened. Beolab 5s have been don't have a lot of flexibility over the way they work. They're designed to give a broad spread of sound and to give an even distribution. So we initially put the Beolab 50s and the 90s into wide mode to try and match that 180 degree spread of the treble. We've tried the Beolab 50s in their pure equalisation mode with a nice even spread of sound. We've then put on an artificial EQ, which B&O make available, that matches them to the way the Beolab 5s perform, with a 6 decibel boost and I think the range of about 100 to 300 hertz. So it gives more that classic B&O sound, the warm, slight increase in bass. And then we've put the 50s and the 90s into narrow mode. So now we're, to use Jeff Martin's analogy, we're comparing a car with a 6-speed gearbox to an old one with a 5-speed. We've tried them both all in 5th gear. We've now moved up a gear. This is where it becomes quite jaw-dropping. The ability of the 90s in particular to image sounds, the way you can hear individual performers on a stage. You can hear if a drummer is sat behind a vocalist. It's literally that precise. The narrow mode brings out the analytical precision, I suppose. The fact that if you're in a concert hall and you were to have the performers on the stage in front of you, you've got that experience now in your living room. I've never heard anything quite like it before.
I think, Steve, all that needs to be said is I'll go and get my credit card machine.
Yes. It's absolutely incredible. Talking of getting the card machine, I suppose I've got to make the decision. I've got to say, with no barriers, I've heard the 3 speakers. What would I decide? And that is really, really difficult. I didn't think I'd say this, but I'm struggling to decide where I would put my money. The obviously prices are different, and leaving that aside, I would have to have 2, to be honest. The only way I could answer this would be to say I would have to have Beolab 90s in my lounge, given no barriers. That sound, once it's heard, is without equal. In my workshop, where I suppose because I'm awkward, where I have home cinema running, I have musical instruments playing, I have friends round with drum kits, I need a speaker that will act as a live music speaker as well. I would have to have Beolab 5s. But one day with a separate home cinema room, I could see myself adding Beolab 50s. So it's a decision that is far more difficult than I ever thought it would be. I think I need to have a bit more listening time, if that's okay. Okay, so I think the aim really of this video, Nick, is to get people to come and listen to these speakers.
Absolutely,
isn't it?
yeah.
So I thought probably the best way to end is to give people some pointers, because whilst ultimately this is just about hearing speakers and hearing music, there are a few little things you can do to get the best of it. I've brought a little sound pressure level meter. You don't need one of these. If you're feeling technical and you want to hear the comparison between a couple of speakers at the best, there are a few free Android or iPhone apps you can get which will tell you the sound pressure, just like this does. Personally, I've always done that because sometimes when you hear several speakers in a row, the louder one sort of sounds better and your brain doesn't know why. So if you hear the same song and you know that it's at the same volume as the speakers before, you can get a fair comparison. So I suppose that would be my first suggestion to people. And the other one, bring some songs you know and you like.
Absolutely.
We've had a brilliant morning, haven't we? What have we had? Madonna, Roxette, Kraftwerk. We've had Jean-Michel Jarre. We've had Frank Sinatra. What was the other big band track that you had?
The Goodwin Band.
The Goodwin Band, yeah. So, I mean, I love this. I must admit, there are days like this, I love my job. And hearing my favourite music through some of the best speakers in the world, but also then hearing your favourites, and I'm going to be going back and looking up some of those big band tracks that I wouldn't otherwise have listened to, but hearing them presented so well, I'm starting to get back a bit more of my love for music that might have waned over the years.
It's fair to say, Steve, that we also relate to that because clients who come in who know a particular piece of music, it might be an artist or a track that we've never heard of.
Yeah.
So it's widening our horizons as well.
Yes.
It's really helpful if somebody comes in who knows a particular piece of music, they know how they think it should sound, and then they can hear how it actually sounds.
Yes, yeah. So admittedly, I've got one track that, one of the ones we played this morning, that I've probably played every time I've bought a pair of speakers in the last 25 years. That's a Roxette track for sort of 1980s Euro pop. And nothing special about it. It's not a high-end audiophile complex song, just a piece of music I really, really love and know well. And I sort of feel I know how it should sound. And this morning I've heard new things in that track that I didn't know were there, and I love that. I love that. I'm falling in love with my music again. And I suppose the last thing I would suggest is one that perhaps is sort of obvious but sort of not, in that I always make sure my ears are really clean before I come and seriously want to listen to something, because life happens and sometimes you know, as an adult, you get you can find that your hearing can drop away a little bit in performance. You don't realise. So, yeah, I make sure in the week leading up to wanting to really seriously listen, I'll get some drops of olive oil in my ears and make sure they're properly clean. And I've loved this morning just hearing the tinkling of cymbals and treble. That otherwise, part of that is good speakers, and part of it is knowing that I'm not holding myself back from my ears not working at the best. So hopefully that's helpful to somebody listening. Other than that, it's really just, if you like music, I think, to be honest, you need to come to Wilmslow and hear these speakers is what I would suggest. I've not seen anywhere else in the UK that's got Beolab 5s, Beolab 50s and Beolab 90s in one room, where you can switch immediately between them, hear the differences. So yeah, I think if there's one thing to take away from this video, it's choose some music and yeah, come and hear these speakers.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks.